Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than iExcel, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K to 12. iExcel gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states across the US show that schools that use iExcel outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use iExcel love that they can easily see how their schools are performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And iExcel doesn't stop at just data. iExcel also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that iExcel is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit iexcel.com/PM to get started.
You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Monday Matters. Jen, we are in the middle of March. And, last time we were together, we did a Q&A where someone asked, what do we do with parents who come to us with an assumption that educators can't be trusted? And we said, maybe we should have done this as a Monday Matters. Well, guess what? We're going to go a little bit deeper, but really, we're going to go deep first with something you motivated me to think about. And that was from your recent newsletter when you talked about trust as the crux. So do you mind setting the tone for why you wrote about that? And then I just want to kind of dwell on that today because, and why you chose that title, Trust at the Crux.
Right. So I was thinking about this because I was remembering being a seventh grader. And by that, I mean, I remember the time my very best friend simply stopped talking to me. She just stopped talking to me. And it was a horrible week. She got everybody kind of lined up to not talk to me. Long week. And then she marched up to me on Monday morning and said, okay, I'm over it. We can be best friends again. And we were, in fact, for many years, but I never really trusted her again. And full disclosure, I did the exact same thing to a friend of mine in 8th grade. I just stopped talking to her and I got everybody lined up to not talk to her. And it was mean and it was heartless. And I have no idea why I did it. Maybe power or whatever. And then when we became friends again, I could see in her eyes, I mean it, I could see in her eyes, she never trusted me again. And because of those experiences, I think I often think of trust as kind of as an emotion, as something that feels good. It's soft, it's inclusive, it's kind, it's being honest. But I have come to see trust as a little bit more clinical than that. And research would tell us that too. So what I mean by that, the work of Victoria Barlow tells us that trust is actually a judgment. It's an internal calculation that we're having all the time, which is this person going to perform as expected? Are they going to do what I think they're going to do? With my friends in junior high, they didn't. I didn't think that's what a best friend would do. And so that trust was broken. So when we put that on a principal's work, and principals are always wanting to be trusted thoroughly by parents, by students, by teachers. But it's almost impossible, right? Because with this work we do, so many times we don't perform or we don't act as expected. We may not have a staff meeting agenda the way it's expected. We may not give a discipline solution or decision as everybody expects. We may not back up a teacher's decisions or behaviors the way we're expected to. And so trust is always being tested for principals. And that, to me, you asked me to kind of talk about the crux of it. The crux of trust in leadership really is the relentless and I would say impossible attempt to meet conflicting expectations of so many people at once.
Wow, Jen, what a way to start. Because I think it's so important to turn the light on in the room and go, okay, let's just call this what it is.
Right.
And I think as leaders, it is the vast complexities of this work that make it so hard. And so first of all, I am so appreciative that you've just named the pain of trying to build trust when people are constantly questioning your judgment or your integrity. And so I do think that the first step is just acknowledging that
Mhm.
there's always going to be someone upset, even with a good decision. There's always going to be someone. In fact, I've said it to friends and colleagues in coaching situations that usually a good decision ticks somebody off.
Mhm.
Um, and, because you're always making decisions based on the values that you hold for your entire school community. But then once you name that, I also think it's important to come back and then put yourself on the other side of yourself and ask, okay, naming that reality that may never change, that there's going to be conflict and pushback and people questioning my judgment. What are some things that I can be doing to minimize the fallout or to minimize the risks that I might put myself in of unduly causing people to question my judgment?
Right.
What would you say to a leader that there are some things they can be doing to try to at least step into that reality and control what they can?
Right. Well, being fair, being methodical, communicating a why, being careful. If someone gets the short straw, right, are those reasons reasonable and understandable and explainable? Or are people walking around feeling like decisions are made willy nilly without regard to implications and outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves in
Yeah.
order to, because I said this in the newsletter too, it's not, trust isn't about the content of our decisions so much as it's about the process of making them and the clarity with communicating them. So people see, I'm quoting somebody, I don't remember who, feel tone before content,
Yeah. Well, I'll quote
right?
somebody.
Well,
Can I?
there you go. Please
Yeah.
quote.
So Daniel Pink, when he wrote the book When, When, which is all about the science of timing, he did tons of research around different times of the day when people make their biggest mistakes or they create malpractice or judges
Mhm.
make the worst rulings. And in that book, he pulls out research and shows that doctors sued for malpractice are almost overwhelmingly sued not because of the malpractice, but because of the tone or the treatment of the
Mm.
patient.
Mm.
And so I think, Jen, that's such a great point, which is that sometimes we lower the anxiety of other people or the opportunity for them to judge us first just based on how we treat them
Mhm.
as humans. And to come back to something else you said, how we're collectively involving them when we can
Right.
in the hard decisions in front of us. I'll give you a good example. I was working with a principal recently, working on next year's master schedule. And this principal knew there were going to be some changes that were going to upset people. So this principal pulled all of those players together to say, hey, we're looking way down the road here, but I need your input. But I also need you to know the data I'm looking at of why, if we make this change, it's based on our students. It's not based on feelings. It's based on the raw data in front of us of numbers of kids and numbers of requests. And the outcome of that meeting was teachers being able to go, oh, I see now too what you're seeing. And now this is going to be a more collective decision than just you making it and then us finding out in August about this change.
Right. Right. And I'm going to use that to say another thing that I feel deeply is the word transparent has become weaponized, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
by parents, teachers, communities who are saying you aren't being transparent. And many a school administrator is like, I don't even know what you're accusing me of there. What are you saying? It's a way to say, I don't trust you, cloaked under, you didn't tell me everything, or
Right.
I didn't get what I want. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just had this conversation actually with a member of our community. He said, what do people mean when they say that the school isn't being transparent? I said, usually I think it means I didn't get what I want or I didn't know. And I didn't know what decision was being made or how. And
Mm-hmm.
many school administrators are struggling with this. A friend of mine in Missouri actually said, I literally put everything on my website and still they say they don't know. They're not going to get this information. And then they say I didn't provide it. And
Yeah.
my answer to him was yes. That's true.
Yes. Yes.
And so the only way that you can continue, build trust through transparency is just continue to say, it was there, it was there. You can't knock on people's doors one by one in your town and say, hey, just wanted to let you know, we're going to change the school start times next year. You can just communicate as best you can. And when people accuse you of lack of transparency, they're usually saying, I don't trust you because I didn't know something.
Yeah. I like to call that the other side of the moon challenge, which is, because when I was a kid, my dad would take us out and let us look through the telescope at the moon and all its beautiful craters. I didn't know that you can only see that one side, even if you're in China. I didn't know that the moon's face always stays one-sided as it goes around the Earth. But it was a leader. I've told this story to listeners before, but I'm going to say it again. It was a leader. So when I was in college, I must have been complaining about something. And this other leader said to me, Will, one of the biggest challenges of being a leader is you see more the moon of a situation than a lot of people do, and they can only see one side.
Mm-hmm.
So first you have to recognize most other people only see one side of the moon of your work. So give them some grace. But two, you have to decide what parts of the other side of the moon you can show them. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes you can show them other parts and sometimes you can't because it's protected. It's confidential. It is against the law for you to show them that part of the moon. And so I think we're coming full circle back to what you said earlier. The reality is you'll never do it perfectly, but that reality should then motivate us to ask the harder question, what things can I do? And so I'm going to come back to something else you said too, which is the importance of process, mm-hmm. the importance of clarity. If I'm stepping into the environment that you've helped create as a school leader, are you answering in advance as many potential questions as you possibly can so that I've lowered the anxiety of my day or my expectations so I can get to the heart of what I need to be doing the hard work on? Right. The hard work of being a teacher, educator in a school day should be helping students learn, not figuring out that you've changed this entire system of how we submit days for substitutes without training us on how to do it, or not without being aware that we have this huge event coming up and no one told us. And so I'm just saying that, Jen, because you and I have been those leaders that had to learn the hard truth of like, the more we can create those processes and expectations in advance, the more we're going to be able to communicate in a way that we build more trust.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So I know sometimes I feel like I'm saying things that are like such no-brainers, but I'll never forget one time I was standing in a group. It was probably some kind of principal conference. I don't even remember the place now, but I think it was assistant principals. And I remember saying to them, we were talking about time. Somebody had asked a question about time management. And I said, it's really important right now. This is probably the spring that you're setting your calendars for next year. In fact, I would suggest you go ahead and try to put as many things as your calendars for the next couple of years. And they laughed and they thought I was joking. And I went, well, hold on a second. That may have sounded funny. Like, as I know you're so overwhelmed, you can barely get through this week, that I'm asking you to plan out the next 2 years, but I'm asking you to plan out the next 2 years. If you can think about in advance, all those pieces you already know are going to be happening, then why aren't you putting them on your calendar now? And I know that I'm speaking to some people that are like, that is a no-brainer, Will, but then I'm also saying it out loud because occasionally I've met people that thought that's funny. But I'm saying it because if we're going to build trust in other people, then we have to ask, what's it like to be on the other side of me? And I would certainly much rather be on the other side of somebody who knew what was coming and told me than someone who expected me to guess.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. How do we want to wrap this up? Because if trust is the crux, is that the crux? How do we make sure that we're developing it and modeling it ourselves?
Well, yeah. And I thought you were maybe trying to find a rhyming word there, but here's how I'm going to wrap it up. This is the season of a lot going on as we finish up this year, and we have one foot firmly into next year, right? It's a jigsaw puzzle that we're going through here. We're bound to disappoint people, and we're bound to fall short of their expectations, but we can always meet their expectations of care, thoughtfulness, giving the why as much as we can, and we can meet their expectation that they'll always see one side of the moon and maybe sometimes the other side. How about that for a wrap up?
That's a good wrap up. Well, Jen, thank you for writing about this. And I do want to point people to one other source that's been super helpful for me is I've worked with principles around trust. And it's a book by Stephen R. Covey called The Speed of Trust. It's a classic now. But what I like about Stephen's book is it's painfully specific.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's take the area of self-trust, the area of relational trust, the area of market trust, and the area of community trust. And let's dig deep into every one of those categories and ask, how are you doing? And so if you ever want to read a book, in addition to Jen's book on trust, then that's another resource that I would point you to. But Jen, how can people stay connected with you and your wonderful resources?
Yes, they can find me at jenschwanke.com. Email me or subscribe to my newsletter.
And you can find today's post and all other resources that you may be interested in at williamdparker.com. And Jen, as we're stepping into spring, I'll say one more thing. This is the time of the year where you and I are already planning out our next 2 years. And so I'd love to connect with anybody listening who wants someone to come in and work with their teams or welcome staff back or do some one-on-one coaching. So if that's something you think either Jen or I could help you with, or if you want recommendations of people we love, just call us or email us and we'll point you in the right direction. Thanks, Jen. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.